Hey everybody. Hey, check it out. We're outside today. So I want to talk about some financial matters. Might be a little tougher for you to swallow, but you need to sell these now because all they're doing is eating your money. There's something my dad used to say about horses is that all they do is eat and poop money. Well, these are some things that if you ever want to retire, if you're close to retirement, or even younger, and I say that because regardless, these items eat money and can keep you from hitting your goals. And I'm guilty of having a few of these too. So let's get into this and talk about these items. First one, and really all these kind of fall under the same kind of a bracket, and that is expensive toys. The one that I'm guilty of having used to eat up my income was motorcycles. I rode Harley Davidsons for basically 40 years. I spent a lot of money buying motorcycles, insuring motorcycles, fixing, upgrading, adding fancy toys to them, making payments. And really, it wasn't until I got some financial maturity that I realized that I really didn't need to buy new motorcycles every few years, kind of like with cars. I loved them. So I didn't even bat an eye to say, I want a new one. Instead of putting money into parts to upgrade this one, I'm just going to buy a new. And some other items fall under the same category. One is boats. Boats are very expensive. Unless you have a lot of time, they cost and eat money. ATVs, I have a fellow I work with that has several of them. He loves to play with them, loves to race, but they eat up a lot of money to own and to trailer and to take places that you can actually ride them. Not a lot of places let you do that just out in the field unless you own property. The next one on my list is RVs, especially with the latest van life, RV life, living on the open road thing that's taken YouTube by storm. And we've watched a few people too, and over the years that have done similar ideas. And I think they're very cool. I think the whole idea of living in an RV sounds glamorous. It sounds cool to pick up and travel every few days, to go to new locations. Let's be real about this. RVs are expensive to buy. They're very expensive to maintain. And unless you're boondocking or living in parking lots all the time, they're very expensive to park at an RV park overnight. Even state campgrounds can get very expensive. And a lot of places, RVs are only allowed to stay in a certain spot for up to 2 weeks. And then you got to move. I've heard people say, oh, I want to get an RV and live in an RV in Florida. Well, that's great if you can find a place that will let you keep your RV there, maybe as a permanent site, and stay year round. But you're going to be paying expense for that as well. So think about that before you lock yourself into an RV. They can be very expensive. Even used ones have a lot of expenses that go with them. So let's move on. Next thing is going to be expensive cars. If you are making payments on cars, you need to think about that. And I've shared this on the channel before. My wife and I are in the process of paying off what's left of our car, and it wasn't an expensive car. We bought a used car that was a few years old. I let somebody else pay the retail fees and the depreciation before I buy. I never pay retail, never buy new. But uh, it was more than we typically would spend, but it was newer, had low mileage, etc. Anyway, you still need to pay those off before you go into retirement. That's my advice. I know a lot of people feel that way. You don't want to go into retirement with any more expenses than you need. You're going to be on a fixed income. And unless you want your fixed income to include a new car, I would not do that. Now, one of the things that all of those have in common is that they have to be insured, you have to be titled and licensed, they have to be renewed all the time. And unless you're using it every day, it's not making any money. They're depreciating assets. So you're not getting anywhere with them. You're paying to have it, and that's about it. There's nothing wrong with having a great used car. Now, another caveat to these is if you have them and they are paid for and all you're paying for is insurance and renewals, that's something you can consider. And I'm not saying to sell anything. You do what you want with your money. This is your life. But these are expenses that eat up your budget, and that's why I say they eat your money, because maintaining them and keeping them is expensive. And if you don't want to make those kind of payments anymore, then you need to consider paying. And if you can't pay for them, sell them off. Now, here's another one that I found that people still have: timeshares. Come on, people, are we serious? My mom had to pay almost $5,000 to get out from under her timeshare, even when the primary on this timeshare, my stepfather, had passed. They still would not release her from that contract until she went to one of those timeshare attorneys that got her off. Otherwise, she was spending $5,000 a year to maintain, to go down for a week or 2 weeks a year. just in fees and etc. And they spend a lot of money to get involved. So if you are in a timeshare and you're not going to use it anymore, get out from underneath it. It's ridiculous to have that stuff. Another thing that you would consider, I would consider, and this isn't necessarily a depreciating asset, but having a second home. Homes are a great way to build equity and create wealth, etc. But if you have a second home and you are not renting it out to make money or using it as a short-term rental with Airbnb, something to that nature, or if you have a second home and you're living 6 months in two locations like snowbirding, then it would be one thing to have that second home and have it paid for and keep your fees low. And hopefully your first primary home is paid for as well so that you can actually own it, because with taxes and insurance, you never own anything in this country, at least. But if it's making you money or covering you, at least you're in better shape. Now, to go along with some of these things we've talked about, these expensive toys, one of the things I think you need to consider is that you don't need them and they take up space in your budget. But the other thing is, do you really have time to use them? That's where they become depreciating, because even though you have it, even if it's owned, it's costing you money one way or the other. If you're using it, it's costing you a lot of money. And if you're not using it, it's costing you money to have, even though you're not using it. That was the thing I found out with my motorcycles for many of the years I had them. I'd never had enough time to ride to make making payments worthwhile. But I didn't catch on to it until I'd already spent way too much money. Let's just leave it at that, way too much money. So I'm trying to save you from doing the same thing. And if you're part of the younger crowd, John, you need to think about that as well. My son has a motorcycle. It is paid for, but he's also now looking to get into a house. And I said, you have an asset, sell that asset. It'll put money into your house account and get you there closer. It's a hard decision, because if it's paid for, which his is, he has a hard time wanting to part with it. But at the same time, he wants to get into a house, and I get that too. Um, but anyway, these are just a few of my thoughts. Don't own something that eats your money. Okay. Not just, there's a lot of things that you're spending money on that you may not want to take that expense into retirement. And if you can't enjoy it, it's not worth the money. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.